already skinned, right? Because the invalidation was before, and it was already skinned. You'd have to carry out the skin separately. While with Rabbi Chanina, right? You'd have to burn it. So this opinion holds that if you find that it's treif, some problem in the internal organs, the sprinkling of the blood still helped, and you don't burn the skin. Why? Because it wasn't recognized. The invalidation wasn't recognized before the blood was sprinkled. So for that reason, it helps for the Dekanami. I'll bring you a proof. It's funny because it says, Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Midvarav lamadna, from his words we learn. If you slaughter a bechar, and you find that the bechar is not the firstborn animal, and you find that it was a treifa, so the kayanim keep the skin.
Wow.
When was it treif? Before. So obviously, the fact that you found out that it was treif afterwards, and you did all the whole service, that validates the skin. Even though afterwards you found out that it was, because at the time of the sprinkling of the blood you didn't know that, so the skin becomes valid. Velamai kamash malon, Rabbi Akiva. So then, if that's the case, so what's Rabbi Akiva teaching? Hakamash malon afilu b'gvulin. His chiddush is, if Rabbi Chanina says, if Rabbi Akiva is saying what Rabbi Chanina is saying, what is Rabbi Chanina saying? Rabbi Chanina is saying that if you find out later, the skin is valid, and Rabbi Akiva says the same thing. Rabbi Akiva says that no. So Rabbi Akiva has to add some chiddush. He says, let's say a bechar is normally a sacrifice, but if the bechar has a blemish, then it's not brought as a sacrifice. What do you do with the bechar? You give it to the kohen, and the kohen can take it home with him. He doesn't bring it as a sacrifice in the temple, he brings it home. That's why there was this whole issue with the kohen may put a blemish in it, and right? So the kohenim were not trusted on what's considered a blemish or not. There was this whole thing with that. So let's say that he takes it home, and you have to eat it. If it dies, if the animal dies and it's not slaughtered, then the purpose of that bechar.
When would it die? Whenever.
You took it home and it wasn't slaughtered. If it just died, so then you don't keep the skin. You have to bury the whole thing. Rabbi Akiva says that even though the main point of taking it home and slaughtering it is in order to be able to eat the flesh, and if it wasn't slaughtered properly, then you wouldn't get the skin. But here, because everything was done right, and you only found out later that it was invalid beforehand, they still keep the skin. So that's the chiddush of Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rab Chia bar Abba Rab Yechon Halacha Rabbi Akiva. He says, Rabbi Yochanan says, Allah Zerek Rabbi Akiva. V'af Rabbi Akiva le'yamar keshel yitiru mumcha. Aval lo yitiru mumcha loy. Even Rabbi Akiva only allowed this. Do you have apprentices? Am I reading through apprentices? I think I remember that this was taken out.
No, it said basar b'kvura ve'or b'srifa. It said here.
Yeah, I have another apprentice. I have two.
You have. But with the rabbi, you have two. We can ask the lawyers. Legally, what we're doing this.
Okay, let's conclude the Gemara that
You and I need to see.
The Gemara concludes that v'hilchasa kedivri chachamim. The halacha is like the sages. Even though Rabbi Yochanan said that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, but our Gemara concludes that the halacha is like the sages. And what did the sages say? That we don't go like Rabbi Chanina's kind of kohenim.
Wow. But he was he saw להלכה, what happened in בית המקדש.
Yeah.
And חכמים poskim against him.
Yeah, because they said that the fact that he didn't see it doesn't mean anything. The Rebbe has a very interesting point. In your first biology class, they tell you that there's no such thing as
Bees and
what's it called? A generation that comes from that the maggots come out of the meat. Spontaneous generation. They tell you that there's no such thing as spontaneous generation.
Woo, you had today.
Either you have a great memory, or you had one of your kids was a 9th grader or something.
So what is the
Okay.
what is mean?
So it was
in regular Hebrew. His English is Shakespeare.
Spontaneous?
Go ahead, never
You know
mind.
what that means?
Let the rabbi talk, please, Jeff. You had
So
today.
the problem is that in halacha there is such a thing as spontaneous generation. Yeah, there's certain lice that you're allowed to kill on Shabbos because they're not really
Yes.
they're not really born.
Not mosquitoes.
No, they're born
That's
from.
a different.
No. They're born from the ground. It's
See?
not.
Yeah.
Yes, there was Rambam right about
Right.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
See?
So the
Know all
scientists
about it.
did tests. They did tests. Louis Pasteur. They did these tests with where they had it with the loop so that no bacteria should get in, and they didn't find any bacteria, and they left it open and they found. So they said it must be that it comes from the air,
Yes.
and it's not really coming from the
Land.
from
The
the
mud.
substance itself. So they disproved spontaneous generation. So the Rebbe asked, he said, because they asked about, well, what about in halacha? We find that there is. He says, what happened to the scientific method? You didn't find spontaneous generation doesn't mean it doesn't exist. They said that's not science. He says you weren't successful. You haven't disproved it. Okay. So
Already we miss you. That's the song we want to hear now.
let's learn the Mishnah.
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
Param Anisrafim. These are special sacrifices. This is if the Kohen Gadol doesn't have Eira, or if the Sanhedrin doesn't have Eira and everyone follows, or majority follow. They have to bring this sacrifice. Those are the Param Anisrafim. Asirim Anisrafim is if there's some sort of idol worship that was done based on what a decision that was made by the Sanhedrin. Special sacrifices that they're entirely burnt, and they're not burnt on the altar. And the blood, instead of being put on the outer altar, is put on the inner altar. These are special sacrifices, unique things. So where are they burnt? Nisrafim. Oh, I'm sorry. Bismanche nisrafim k'mitzvasan. At the time that they're burnt according to their correct, everything is done correctly. Nisrafim Beis Hadeshin. They're burnt in a place called Beis Hadeshin.
Why they was taking,
Umatamin begadim.
why they was taking this one out? What's the reason? Not nisrafim.
It's a totally different type of sacrifice. The blood was not put on the mizbeach. It was put inside the sanctuary. On the mizbeach inside, on the parechas.
Okay. It's very interesting. Before you say like he was doing kshafim with this, I didn't understand how the.
No, I don't know about that.
Okay.
Umetamin begadim. The one that burns it, his clothing become tamei. Anyone that's involved in this burning, the clothing become tamei, has to go to the mikveh, wash his clothing.
So it's like.
And let's say they're not being burnt because it's properly. They're burnt because something went wrong.
It's look like paraduma, no? Similar.
Yeah, but that was slaughtered outside as well. This was slaughtered inside the temple.
Okay.
Nisrafim Beis Abira. It's burnt on the Beis Abira if something went wrong. Then when it's burnt, it doesn't contaminate the person that's burning it because it's being burnt because it's invalid. Very interesting. Let's say when they're carrying it out, everything is being done right, and they put it on poles to carry it out. They would put these poles on the shoulders, and they would walk out with this animal.
It's like you
hanging.
carry
So-
the fruit.
Yeah, and the pictures and the Carmel wine, right?
Yeah, Carmel.
Yatzu Harishainim Chutz L'chaim Asar Zara. When the first ones are walking out and they have the poles on their shoulders. So once they leave the courtyard, so they're already performing the service of burning it, even though they didn't start burning it, but they're walking out. So the ones in the front walk out first. So they become tamei right when they leave the courtyard. The other ones are still behind. So they are not tamei yet, because they didn't start the performance of the burning, because they didn't leave the temple. So the ones in the front become tamei. So okay. Harishainim metamin begadim, achreinim einam metamin begadim ad sheyatzu. The second ones aren't tamei until they actually leave. So you need the whole thing out before they become tamei. Yatzu elo ve'elo metam begadim. When they're both out, metam begadim. Rab Shimon Aimer einam metam ad shisus ar beruban. It doesn't become tamei just from carrying it out. It becomes tamei from burning it itself. When it becomes tamei, but when the fire catches on to the animal, that's when their clothing become tamei. And then nita chabasar, once the flesh becomes burnt, then the mitzvah was done already. And even if you're going to add coals and all of that, you don't become tamei from that involvement, because the mitzvah was already done; it was already burnt. Okay, so according to Reb Shimon, the time for becoming tamei is much smaller. My bira, we said that if it became invalid, it doesn't get burnt in the Beis Hadeshen, in the place, we're going to see where all of these places are, but instead of that, it gets burnt in the Beis Habira. It says, my bira, what is the bira? Amar Rabba Barbachana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan says, Makim Yesh Bahar Abayas, there's a place on the Temple Mount. Ubira Shema, it's called, so it's burnt on the Temple Mount, this place called bira. Rish Lakish Amar Kol Abayas Kulakar bira. The whole temple is called bira, so it's burnt somewhere in the temple. Shnemer Bela Bira Asher Chinaisi, as it says, the temple that I prepared. Amar Rab Nachman. Oh my gosh. Let's get at least till the questions, till by Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rab Nachman, Amar Rav Shleisha, Beis Hadeshanim Heim. There's three places where the ashes are burnt, where things are turned to ashes. Beis Hadeshan Gadol Hayabazar Shasham Sarfim Psuli Kachem Kadashim Veimori Kachem Kalim Paraman Esrafim Mesiram and Esrafim. There's one place which is called the Beis Hadeshan. This is the big Beis Hadeshan. This was in the courtyard. That any invalid sacrifice that was not supposed to leave the temple would be burnt there. And also, any invalid sacrifice that was meant to stay in the temple was burnt there. Beis Hadeshan Achar Haya Bahar Abayas. There was a second one that was in the Temple Mount, not in the courtyard of the temple, in the Temple Mount. Shesam Sarfim Paraman Esrafim Mesiram and Esrafim Shir Bem Sulach Zrika. That over there, if these burnt sacrifices after the blood was sprinkled became invalid, you would burn them on the Temple Mount. That was called the Beis Habira. K'mitzvasan, and then there was the if it was done properly, then these burnt sacrifices were done chutz l'shalish machanas, outside the Temple Mount entirely, outside the three camps. Okay, Tani Levi says similar, but it's slightly different. Shleisha Beis Hadeshanim, there's three places where the sacrifices are burnt. Beis Hadeshan Gadol Haya Bazar Shasham Sarfim Psuli Kachem Kachem Veimori Kachem Kalim Paraman Esrafim Mesiram and Esrafim Shir Bem Psul, and this is where it switches. Bein Kodim Zrika, Bein Lachar Zrika. Whenever the invalidation took place by these two sacrifices, these burnt sacrifices, the cows, this is burnt in the Temple Mount, in the temple courtyard itself. The difference between Rab Nachman and Levi is after the sprinkling of the blood, if it became invalid. Levi says it's still burnt in the temple courtyard, and Rab Nachman said that it's burnt outside the courtyard. The second one, according to Levi, is Beis Hadeshan Achar Haya Bahar Abayis Sham Sarfim Parna Sarfim Sirna Sarfim Shim Bem Sul B'Yitziyasan. Even after the blood was sprinkled, they became invalid on their way out. Then they're burnt outside. In other words, they were being taken out, and then they became invalid. U'kemitzvah and chutz l'shalish machnas. Okay. And according to its mitzvah, it's burnt outside the 3 camps. And now we have 4 questions. So.
Pesach.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi Smith. Shkaya.
Love you too, Bob.
Thank you.